Welcome to the Healing Paths podcast weekly hot take series. Each week, we bring you powerful stories and strategies from leaders who are making a real impact by building stronger, more resilient communities. Get ready to be inspired, motivated, and equipped with tools to thrive in both your personal and professional life.
Welcome to the Healing Path. My name is Allie Fisher. I am with the Foundation for Family and Community Healing. Life can be tough and no space is spared that reality. Workplaces are not often considered places of healing, although they can be. In fact, we believe that healing can and should take place everywhere we go, and that healing so that we can have better relationships, more engaged teams, and an overall better work experience really matters, for the sake of both fulfilling lives and also for the bottom line. So today my guest is Aerian Vorce. She's going to talk about her experiences working in various different roles within human resources, specifically at Relay Resources and at Goodwill of the Olympics and Rainier region. So hi Aerian, thanks so much for being here with me today.
Hi Allie, thank you for having me on.
Absolutely. So to get started, could you give us a quick 90-second overview of the work that you've done in HR throughout your time with Relay and with Goodwill?
So I started off in human resources as a generalist for Goodwill, and that was right before COVID hit. And with the diverse background that I have, it just trying to transition to an HRIS position, so human resource information systems, and it just became a more technology forward position, and moving forward it turned into a combination of benefits, and then you've got supporting payroll, and from there when we started to bring individuals back from COVID, we hired 2 generalists, and then I became supporting them, and then I moved more towards the back end, mainly focusing on onboarding and employee engagement, employee relations with the human resources manager, and then reporting, making sure that our executive leadership had the information that they needed and that could be pulled from the system that we were using, utilizing it to the fullest. Then with Relay Resources, I really came on as a position management, getting those positions optimized and streamlined so that when they did have employees come on, it was easier for the employee. Using those platforms, it can be a little tricky, especially if you don't have a lot of knowledge around technology. And so just being able to make sure that the employee experience is there, making sure that if we say this is how you're going to log in, that's how you're going to log in, and making sure that if there are employee documents for onboarding, that they're able to access those, making sure that when we go from the recruiting portion to the employment portion, those triggers within the system actually happen and making sure that their experience is easy and quick and enjoyable. Yeah,
it sounds like you've done a lot of different roles within your time, and just HR encompasses so much. And so like you shared with COVID, all of a sudden you've got a tech job that you weren't planning on having, and dealing with making that process smooth for everyone else. Well, it's also not very smooth for you because it's all new for you too. So that sounds really challenging. Is that a decent assessment of the experience of like trying to kind of drink from a fire hose and learn a bunch of new stuff, but then somehow make it easy for other people to learn it?
Yes. And so one thing that I've really enjoyed with HR is that you are constantly learning, and everything is always updating. Everything, it's like a space race almost with HR. There's something newer, there's something better, there's expansion. Companies grow. Companies downsize. So depending on your company size, you have to have a knowledgeable idea of those platforms. And yes, sometimes it feels like you're kind of being thrown in the deep end, and there's like, okay, we need to assess this. Can you do it? And it's not so much as, oh, that's not my job. It's, I don't know how to do that. I can learn how to do that, and let's do it together.
Yeah. I like what you shared about calling it a space race, where there's just always the new thing. And then when you're dealing with people, and you mentioned employee relations, and in my own experience as an employee, or just in relationships, I feel like so much of what matters is just kind of like how you treat people throughout the process too. Like, say, God forbid, a document doesn't open that is part of the onboarding process, being like, oh, sorry, oops, I'll fix that, rather than being like, oh, well, it should. Are you sure you're opening it correctly? And yeah, so that kind of like soft touch, I feel like, is so important. Is that something that you found as you were navigating that like the way you handled challenges was a big thing that mattered?
So yes, definitely. It became when you're in a smaller HR department, you really got to wear a lot of hats. And keeping in mind that there is still that human touch in HR. Mm-hmm. Yes, there's policies and procedures and you've got to follow them, but there is a human aspect to HR that sometimes gets left out. And especially when we're moving towards everything electronic, like mm-hmm. we tend to think we tend to like out of sight, out of mind when you're not in contact with somebody on a day-to-day basis, like prior to COVID, right? Yeah. And so one thing that I had to pick up really quickly is that troubleshooting. If I was a new employee coming on and I'm having issues, having somebody tell me to log out, log back in was not helpful. That may have been the fix, but again, not very helpful. So I really had to put myself in their shoes and think about, if I was a new employee, what would I appreciate? Mm-hmm. And sometimes I do over detail, but I found that more detail is better than not enough.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. And also the empathy of, what would I want? What would make me feel good in that moment? Like maybe before addressing the actual issue of log out, log in, it's like, oh, that's no fun. Sorry that's happening. Like the empathy connection piece being thrown in there. Thinking about challenges that you've seen within human resources and within, it sounds like you've worked in some different environments, Relay being different from Goodwill. What challenges have you seen in both of those environments? And then how have you seen those challenges addressed?
So with Goodwill, I guess the challenges were a lot of like employee engagement. They have over 1,500 employees and they've got 35 locations and 15 counties. So employee engagement can be really hard. Making sure that each of those locations gets the proper attention can be hard. Mm-hmm. Out of Tacoma is their main hub, and the employees there kind of felt like they got more attention than the retail locations. And I would say that is fair. That is fair. That is where our upper executives work. That is where businesses come to check out headquarters. So there is a lot more attention to that location. And so one of the things that Goodwill has done really well is trying to include their various locations, making sure that their managers have employee wellness programs that they can access. Also, somebody from headquarters that they can reach out to and say, we want to do employee appreciation outside of what we normally do annually. What can you help with? Are there any ideas that I can go with? Do we have a budget in this location for us to be able to move forward and do that? And so that's one thing that I think Goodwill has done really well, is making sure that their store locations have the proper support. And then with Relay Resources, they have one hub in Portland, and then they help employ individuals with disabilities out in the general population. And so they stay with that employee and those employers to make sure that those employees that have been hired on get the type of support that they need. Maybe the retailer can't provide that extra support, but Relay does that extra legwork to make sure that that individual has the help that they need, that they feel confident in the position that they're going into, and so that they feel like they're able to just have this open and wide career, and it gives them the confidence to move forward. And eventually Relay steps back and they go on their own, and they're just fine. And then Relay has also taken part in affordable housing. So some of their employees, they get placed in companies that they do business with, and the employee is eligible for affordable housing, so they can then have that other sense of independence with being able to have an apartment. And so I think that's one thing that they do really well. And also for their employees, they really so they have remote and hybrid work schedules, but they really go out of their way to try and make sure that their remote employees feel just as included as the employees that come into office every day. And when I worked there, even for the short amount of time, I really felt accepted right away and part of the family, and so I really appreciated that.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And as you're speaking, it's clear to see how passionate you feel about the challenges that are being solved through both Goodwill and Relay, and ensuring that, anyone who wants to work is able to do so, and making sure that people with different abilities are able to get out there and feel a sense of purpose and fulfillment and autonomy. So that's a really beautiful thing to hear you talk about and to be excited about. What makes the way that you approach human resources unique? Like, what is the Aerian touch with human resources?
I don't know. So I started off in the military, and so the military is very rigid, and so I really liked that structure. And in the military, that works. That very much works. Transitioning into a civilian HR position was a learning curve, because in the military, you don't really focus on that human aspect of HR. It's, we need these forms filled out, fill out these forms. and as a civilian, they may not understand how to fill out those forms. And so you really have to sit with them and explain how you would fill them out. And if they need additional support, you are there as support. And so for me, I think of it as, if I was in their situation, how would I want to learn? How would I want to be taught? And it's taken me years in HR. I did not learn this overnight. And it's actually gotten even better with my 6-year-old daughter, having to really slow down, and when I'm explaining things to her, not just expecting her to know what I'm talking about. And then kind of reeling in, like, I have so much going on. Like, sometimes we get really busy, even in HR, and somebody can come and ask you a question, and I am guilty of this as well. Kind of snapping and being, can't you do that yourself? Or here, fill it out. But then having to turn back and be like, take a deep breath. I am so sorry. Here is the form. Do you need help? How can I help? Or maybe handing them the form and just saying, if you need help, let me know. Because being in HR, sometimes you're pulled in so many different directions, and you just have to remember to breathe and slow down. And that is one of the things that if it was an Aerian touch, just being to remember to breathe and slow down. Because sometimes I am moving too fast for my own good.
Yeah.
And so having my daughter has really made me think about like HR in a more, I don't want to say parental role, because I don't really think of HR as the parent, but we are there to help, lend a hand, and provide guidance. So I think that would be my Aerian touch.
Yeah. No, I really appreciate that. It sounds like some self-regulation and just, like stress management of how can I still be mindful and treat somebody well and it sounds like, because you said, HR is not parental, but you are there to help. So it sounds like there's this line between offering support, but also not being overly, like not being condescending or paternalistic to a point that assumes that not assuming someone knows or doesn't know, but just being open to what the outcome is going to be, so that you're not either making someone think you don't think they're smart enough or not providing support that's needed. And then doing so in a way that's not saying, oh, I think you're not smart because you don't know this, but is more saying, it makes sense that you wouldn't know this if you've never encountered it before, and I encounter it every day. And so therefore, so that that does sound like a whole lot of different variables to be managing while you're also trying to get a bunch of other stuff done in the background. So I can see how it could be hard sometimes to not just be like, leave me alone for a second.
Exactly.
So taking, I guess, all of that into account, your experiences, the Aerian touch versus what you've seen other people do in the HR space, where do you see things heading in the next 5 to 10 years? And, just kind of ideating on what some of those things may be. I think about things like AI. I think about things like how to keep personal touches while artificial intelligence is stepping into the forefront and is a tool, mental health, just so many different things. But I'm curious of your perspective, what things really stand out to you that seem to be coming in the horizon.
So what I see coming down the pipeline is AI. AI is big. You've got ChatGPT, you've got Google AI now, Amazon even has AI. And so I think AI in HR is inevitable. However, when I've used AI, I really like it because it gives me the technical verbiage that I need, that maybe I didn't know the exact verbiage of how to explain something. But then you can bring in that human touch and edit what information it is giving you. And I've also used AI where it has brought up incorrect information for HR. So it's kind of a double-edged sword. I like to use it to make my emails and my correspondence sound much more professional, because sometimes I get bogged down by the little details. And being able to utilize AI helps me use my thesaurus more or my dictionary more. And so I see AI coming in a lot. especially with the advancement in the human resource information systems platforms, and how a lot of the platforms for, you've got ADP and you've got UKG, those are two of the big ones. They are making their modules look more like a Google search. And so you can utilize AI in their search bar as well. And so I think the merriment of AI with the updating technology, I think it's just inevitable. But finding the right balance, because it's not always going to give you the correct information. So you still have to have, you as a human, there is still going to be that human element, because you've got to fact check.
Yeah.
So it's going to advance, but I think for right now, humans are not obsolete.
Yeah, I'm curious, like, the fact checking piece of, like, AI is not perfect and sometimes it will spit out the wrong answer. But I wonder also, even beyond like the information side, like the personal touch side of, I've worked with AIs that are kind. Claude in particular is one I've been using that there's a lot of effort. Claude is nice to me. And I still wouldn't want to talk to Claude all day. I want people. So I'm curious what you think that balance might look like of, oh yes, employee leverage AI as you navigate these challenges. And then, like, if the onboarding process is done by AI, what would the HR professionals provide, do you feel, that only humans can provide?
I do feel that AI lacks that human connection. So for AI, and I guess the AI platforms I've worked with, they can be very cut and dry. And so when you have a bot that helps with onboarding questions, if the employee that is onboarding writes in that bot, how do I open this document? The bot is only going to reply with how to open that document. It's not going to ask you what the issue is or why, what platform are you using to open the document? Are you in the right web browser? And so the AI bots, for me and for what I've experienced in HR, they are very cut and dry. And so employees have gotten frustrated and not completed HR onboarding because they just get frustrated with it, and it's not helpful, or at least for them, it's not helpful. And they end up getting frustrated, and then they just get that kind of like a sour taste. That's their first impression. And if what your first impression is an artificial intelligence, and you don't have anyone you can reach out to, that can be pretty isolating in itself. And so, at least with Relay and Goodwill, because they work with a population that needs extra help, I don't think either company actually utilizes AI as much as maybe a tech company might, or maybe like a wholesale retailer, more of an online presence rather than a brick and mortar, if that makes sense. And so for my experiences, AI is great when we are writing policies and procedures, and when we're needing legal advice, and when we're updating. But as far as that human touch or that human interaction, it's not beneficial for the companies that I've worked in.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And it sounds like maybe AI, at least at this juncture, is missing some important context or curiosity that humans can bring that AI currently is struggling to bring to those environments. So that's helpful feedback. To dive a little bit deeper into just your life and your story, and this podcast is called The Healing Path, so we all go through stuff in our lives that impacts us in the way that we operate, in the way that we work, in the way that we do everything. What is the biggest or a big failure or challenge that you've faced in your life, and how has that shaped the way that you work and live today?
I'll tell you, a big challenge for me is I guess from moving from a military career, because that's where I wanted to be. I wanted to be in HR in the military, and that's I wanted to retire in the military. Unfortunately, I was unable to, and so I got my associates in pre-nursing because I thought, you know what, I like medicine. I'm really good at science.
Mm-hmm.
And so I feel like once I left the military, I kind of didn't. I felt like I didn't have a purpose anymore. And it was really hard to get into an HR position as a civilian going from the military, because the military's HR is very diverse. And so I started off in reception, and I've worked my way up, which is great. But now as a civilian, I'm finding that I am in the same predicament that I found myself with the military. My background is too diverse. And so I don't know if it's a failure, because I like to learn, and I like to be able to know all the different areas of HR. So I don't see that as a failure, but it is a challenge that I am currently facing, unfortunately.
Mm.
And I've thought about going back and finishing my bachelor's, but then honing in on human resource management with a minor in information systems. But I'm getting told the same thing by my college advisors. I'm going to find that my background is still too diverse. And so I feel like I'm darned if I do and I'm darned if I don't.
Yeah.
And so, unfortunately, my love to grow and learn has also become my Achilles heel, so to speak. So I am just pushing forward the best that I can.
Mm-hmm.
And even though I'm not currently working right now, I'm helping out with my daughter's school a lot. I'm on the PTA board as the treasurer, and so I'm learning more, but in a different area.
Oh no, continuing to diversify.
So,
what could be worse? An employee who loves learning.
So I'm I'm giving it all to God, and if he's gonna find the right fit for me. I'm working with recruiters, so I'm opening a lot of doors. So something's got to stick sometime.
Yeah. Yeah.
The right company will come.
Yeah, absolutely. That does sound really challenging. And truly, it is kind of mind-boggling to me that somebody who's a voracious learner would know too much to be a viable employee. That logic just doesn't make sense to me. And so I wish you all the very best in that journey. And I hope the recruiters are good advocates on your behalf, because I know the job market right now is challenging. I know a lot of people who are in similar situations where they're plenty qualified or overqualified and still just hitting dead ends for whatever reason. So I hope that really turns around soon.
Yeah.
From the pre-interview questionnaire, you had mentioned the importance of work-life balance, and I know you've mentioned your daughter a couple of times as we've talked. Could you share a little bit about how you've seen the organizations that you've worked with effectively support a work-life balance for their employees?
So for Goodwill, their HR, they brought in flexible work schedules. So, like for my daughter, when I was working for Goodwill, she had a couple after school activities that maybe started around 4:30. So I'd come in early, or maybe I'd have a longer work day one other day, and so that I was able to go home a bit early and make it to those extracurricular activities. And so I know that one of my other coworkers for Goodwill, she needed to be able to get her daughter on and off the bus. So they allowed her to have a flexible work schedule where maybe she worked a couple extra hours at home, right? Instead of, and allowed her to be able to pick her daughter up and drop her daughter off. And so with Goodwill, they really tried to work with you as an employee to make sure that your home life wasn't impeded by being at work. And that way you would take the hope was that you would take less time off because you were able to work with the schedule. If you had a doctor's appointment, or if your kid had a doctor's appointment, or let's say, like for me, if my daughter was sick in the morning, I could work from home for a couple hours, husband gets home, and we swap. And then I head to the office, right? And so they were really good about working with you and making sure that a flexible schedule was achievable, and making sure that you got your work done too. If you weren't meeting those milestones or those deadlines, then of course it became like it was a little harder to get those work schedules approved, or like those flexible work schedules approved. So for an employee that is able to make those work, they really wanted to work with you. And then for Relay Resources, they had the flexible work schedule. Their main hours, I think, were like 8 to 5. But if you needed to start work an hour early, or maybe you need to start work an hour late, you just let your manager know, shoot a text, send an email, make a phone call, just letting them know. And they're like, okay, fine, no worries. Or if you needed to work a few extra hours in the evening, again, let your manager know, and then it was, okay, no problem. Because I know, like, for me, for my daughter, drop her off, pick her up, and then she'd have her extracurriculars. I'm toting my laptop everywhere with me. But my manager always knew that I had my laptop on me, and that if they needed me, I had my cell phone, I had my laptop, I have my watch. I have many different ways to have somebody get a hold of me. And then they also knew that she was going to be at Taekwondo, or she was going to be at gymnastics. So if it needed to be a phone call, I was still reachable. But they also knew that and I put these on my calendar so they could also see them, just in case, like maybe there's a last minute meeting. So then I got to get on my laptop, but that's fine because she's in her class. So I'm not actively participating in her class. So that's okay. But they went both employers went out of their way to make sure that the employee, or at least myself, I felt like myself, was valued, and it showed.
Yeah, so it seems like they were looking at you as a whole person who is not only worker, but is also mom, and I'm sure, PTA, treasurer, and many other roles that you have in your life that, you need to also fulfill and that matter not just to you, but it sounds like to them. And it also sounds like there were incentives for employee to, kind of earn the flexibility, which in the end increased, productivity. So the carrot or the stick, and it sounds like this was a really good carrot that was a mutually beneficial thing between your employers and the employees there. So that's awesome. What is the next area? I know you mentioned potentially going back to school, but could be something else. What's the next area of growth that you're focusing on for yourself?
For myself, I think the next area of growth for me is, or would probably be, I do want to continue going to school, but I think I would like to take a theology class.
Mm-hmm.
And it's different than HR. And so I think maybe a change, like I love HR and I love what I do.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes I feel like that's all I do,
Mm-hmm.
if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And I love theology and I love discussing theology and I
Mm-hmm.
like thinking about what could be or what has been.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think I might take a course on theology. So I think that's something I want to do next.
Very cool. I won't dive too deep into it right now, but just to relate, I am in seminary to be a Unitarian Universalist minister in addition to my work. So I can relate to enjoying those deep conversations and the fun, spiritual, theological, philosophical exploration that can bring, both personally and then collectively with classmates. So I hope you get the opportunity to do that. It's fun. If you could have lunch with one person, living or dead, who would it be and why?
If I could have lunch with one person. I would say it would probably have to be Joan of Arc.
Cool.
And I think that what we hear and what we read about in history differs a lot from what actually happens. And so to sit and talk with her and get her perspective, I think that would just be really eye-opening.
Yeah.
Her life, her trials and tribulations, and I just think it would be really interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a beautiful answer. And there are just so many voices that throughout history have not been amplified as much as others.
Yes.
So yes, women and BIPOC and hearing the perspectives of people that, we may not get to hear very often. That would be a treat. That would be a treat. Very cool. So for anyone who's listening today who'd like to connect with you and, maybe explore the possibility of you working for them or something else, maybe they want to offer you a free theology class. Anyone listening? What's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
Probably email. I screen my phone calls.
Very fair. Do you want to share your email here aloud so that folks can reach out to you?
Sure. So my email is my first name dot my last name at gmail.com. So it's AERIAN dot V as in Victor ORCE at gmail.com.
Awesome. So thank you, Aerian. This has been a wonderful conversation to get to know you, to get to know the Aerian touch, and to hear a little bit about your life, both professionally and personally. So thank you for your time and your willingness to do this.
You're very welcome. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for joining us on the Healing Paths podcast weekly hot take series. We hope you've been inspired by today's stories and strategies for building more resilient, healthier, and stronger communities. Remember, resilience isn't just about bouncing back. It's about growing to be bigger and better through every challenge. If you've enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who could benefit from these insights. So stay connected, be resilient, and we'll see you next time.